Welcome to Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast, helping you enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, recognized authorities on the subjects of improving work relationships and cultures, as well as couple and home relationships.
Well, hello and welcome back. Welcome to yet another episode. And as always, we are excited. We're always excited when we have great guests on, lovely guests.
Another special guest.
And today we've got none other than the wonderful Michaela Hyde from Marriage Foundation, who's going to be sharing some great insights into, well, marriage is certainly the heart and the passion. I don't want to give the game away here about what we're going to be talking about, but it's going to be great. So listen and keep tuned. But firstly, welcome, Michaela.
Thank you so much, Jon and Andrea. Honestly, it's such a privilege to be here. And, I love both of you guys very much. We've known each other for a little while now. So, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your podcast.
Yeah, well, we're equally excited about the conversation and just looking forward to having a great chat together. But as usual, we want to set this up right so people understand the caliber of person that we have in our studio today. So let me share a bit of a bio on Michaela. So Michaela Hyde is the Executive Director for Marriage Foundation. She's also a freelance presenter, so a bit unusual for her to be on the other side of the mic being interviewed today.
But she knows cameras.
She knows cameras. Over the years, her experience has included children's TV, health and wellness presenter and coach, and television shopping channels. Since joining the Marriage Foundation team, Michaela has appeared on BBC One's Sunday Morning Live, Talk TV, LBC, Premier Radio, UCB, and Transworld Radio, and has been interviewed on several local BBC radio stations. From 2018 to 2021, Michaela coordinated National Marriage Week. Michaela has a YouTube channel, which you can check out, called The Relationship Hub. And with her husband, she has hosted her own podcast and presented a radio show called The M Word.
Wonder what that could be, the
M Word.
Maybe we'll find out.
So Michaela has been married to Nick since 1999, and they have 2 young adult children. Michaela believes that healthy marriages are fundamental to a stable society, offering the best life chances for children, and that for marriages to work and last, they require regular care and investment by both partners. What a great note to end on and to start this conversation on, because that's where our hearts just intertwine. Michaela, what's the passion that's driving you now, and what's the role of relationships in that?
It's interesting. When I was thinking around this, I took myself back even further before I'd even got into doing any work with relationships and marriages, and realizing that actually a big drive for me has always been about being the best version of myself and helping others to be the best version of themselves as well. And so, which is why I've dipped into things to do with health and nutrition and diet and all sorts of different things. But I think what struck me along the way with my work with Marriage Foundation and working with actually young adults, teenagers around relationship advice, etc., is ultimately relationships, strong relationships, underpin absolutely everything else we do. And so in order for us to be the best version of ourselves, we need to have strong relationships in place. Now, I imagine a lot of your audience will be couples, but that message extends beyond couples as well. It's relationships, whether that's with our children, with our parents, with our work colleagues. Every sphere of our lives is underpinned by relationships and how we do those relationships. And obviously my work with the Marriage Foundation means I do have a real passion for families and for outcomes for children. And you mentioned that obviously in my bio there, that ultimately those strong relationships, which we know from our work we do at Marriage Foundation, statistically, marriages, formal commitment is 3 times more likely to last and work, which is good for the couple and it's good for children and their outcomes. And that's such a driver for me, for sure, because I just feel again that I want the best opportunities for others, for their children. As a parent, you know what it's like as a parent. You want the very best for your kids. That's a big driver. And I want to see that extended beyond my personal circumstances to other families across the UK globally, let's say, as well. Although I don't know how much influence I have globally, but
But I'm sure you have lots of, with all that you've been doing on the media, I'm sure you've been influencing many more than you know. And I love how you started with be the best version of yourself, and also the importance of strong relationships, because that's the missing link sometimes. So we don't realize that wherever we go, there we are. So the skills that we have to turn up with. Tell us some more about that. What's the kind of responsibilities that you think we have as individuals, especially in a couple context or relationship context?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll have been married to my husband Nick this year for 25 years. So that's like,
congratulations,
Silver
milestone. Yeah, so that's exciting, and we look forward to celebrating that. But recognizing, of course, 25 years represents a journey. It represents the ups and downs of life, and I think one of the things that I have really picked up from people and from working with people of all ages around marriage and relationships is I think there's still this idea of this fairy tale life that when you see things, we know social media depicts this kind of glowing, happy, jolly, everything's fine going well. We see it in movies as well. And don't get me wrong, I love a rom-com, but the realities of life are just not like this.
Well, Disney says once you get married and they lived happily ever after, when that's just the start, right?
Exactly. That was the easy bit. People think planning a wedding is tough, but honestly, it's the bit afterwards. And I think absolutely that kind of investment in your relationship, in your marriage from day one is absolutely essential. And I think one of the mistakes I guess people make is there's this idea that you begin a marriage together, the happily ever after bit begins. And you've achieved what you need to do. You're there, you've got a partner, and now you just get on and live life. But of course, you do have to keep on investing. And I say have to, like it's a chore. Especially those early days, you want to anyway. But of course, over time, it's very easy for people to lose focus of that relationship. And it's interesting with our work with Marriage Foundation, one of the stats that we've looked at is looking at when people do separate. People often think it's the big arguments and rows and divorce happens because people are at each other's throats and it's a disaster. And actually, the worst thing that can happen and the most cited reason for separation is drifting apart. And I'm always fascinated by, even when you say that, drifting apart, it doesn't even sound that dangerous, does it? It just sounds like this thing that could happen. You could drift off a little bit. But of course, the more you drift, you're sort of going your separate ways. And people can forget, who am I married to? Who am I with now? What's gone on here? So I think that value of keeping on investing in your relationship day by day. And if I can speak personally for Nick and I, something that we did really early on was actually having date nights and making sure we had date nights. And when people think about date nights, maybe they think about you have to go out somewhere and what have you. When you've got a young family, and we didn't have many babysitters, we had to carve out date night at home. So we had what we would call our wine on Wednesday, because I love a bit of alliteration. So wine on Wednesday. And it was at this little indulgent moment where we indulged each other, but actually it's not an indulgence because it's essential for a relationship to invest in that way. So we would have this time. It might be watching a film, it might be just kind of chatting, having some music on, or whatever it was.
Favorite
but it was
treats.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely ice cream is one of my other Achilles heels, just putting out there. So we would carve out this time on a Wednesday evening. But even, I think the other crucial thing about relationships working and lasting is, even if you don't always have time for a whole evening, maybe once a week, it's maybe once a month, but having what I used to describe on the M Word as these micro dates. So we would make sure we'd have a 10-minute slot each day just to check in with each other, so that our circumstances, our day-to-day, me with the children when they were younger, and some work, I worked part-time, but I was with the children a lot of the time, my husband with his teaching role, we were never far from each other's day-to-day existence because we would have conversations around that. And I think I can't underestimate how important it is to invest in checking in with each other, knowing what's going on in each other's lives and taking an interest in what's going on for that other person as well. Those things are so important.
Yeah, no, absolutely love that. And hearing that you use that word invest in relationships. So we shared in the last episode that we did a few weeks ago now that we had a couples retreat that we ran, and we had people in the room. I think there were 9 couples, us and another 9 couples, so 20 people in the room, and they ranged from, I think the youngest married couple in the room, or together couple, they'd been married for coming up to 3 years.
Yeah.
And at the top end of the scale, there were 36 years. So vast range of experiences in the room. But what was really interesting is, as they sat in the room, and of course, nobody was sharing anything vulnerable. We made sure that everybody had checked in with their partner before you ask any questions or share anything. So nothing. We're not airing any dirty laundry in public. But what was really interesting was for them to recognize that actually we're all going through challenges here. And, that bit about being intentional about investing in the relationship and date nights and micro dates and being, time for each other was so important. But question I have for you is, when things are tense, and I suspect you've never had this in your relationship.
So hypothetically,
you have to really think here now. Okay, go.
Yeah, let's just try and make something up here. No. But when things are tense, though, what do you do? And it's approaching. What did you call it? Wine Wednesday.
Wine on Wednesday.
Wine on Wednesday. It's approaching Wine on Wednesday, but things have been tense. They've said some things that have really irritated you. How do you approach that Wine on Wednesday moment, thinking, okay, is this going to be fun, or what do you do? How do you deal with some of those challenges?
I'm going to be completely honest here, and I think that my husband is actually much better at sort of moving on from a difficult moment. I remain slightly irritated and a little bit moody for longer.
Right.
And I think it is about, I think for us, we would say, absolutely, it's about choosing. It's about making a choice when things have been, tense. And interestingly, I don't know, I'm sure lots of people would relate to this. I would say probably one of the biggest challenges we've faced in our relationship has actually been over the children and how we feel that we want to discipline the children, how we want to bring them up. And that's been an area of tension for sure. I remember we had a day where, with my husband being a teacher, of course, he can't just take a day off when he fancies it. And so whenever Nick's off, so are the children, because school holidays typically will fall, which is a lovely thing for looking after the children, but time together, having a day. Well, he had a day where it was a teacher, I think it was a training day for whatever reason, he had a day where he wasn't at school and the kids were. So we said, we'll go out and do something fun. And in the morning, I think we ended up having a conversation over one of our children and ended up having a bit of a sort of heated moment. Now, we aren't shouty people with each other, but we were cross with each other and irritated. And it completely took the edge off of this day that we were going to have. But I think the thing was that we had to then talk about some of these issues. We couldn't just push them under the carpet. And I think it's sometimes easier. It feels as though we want to kind of, sort of looking to sort of keep the peace, or do we want to make peace? If we want to keep the peace, we don't confront it. If we want to actually make peace with each other, you have to confront things, even though it feels really difficult. And I'm a bit proud and a bit stubborn and would rather not face up to some of the things that I've said that haven't been as good. But having those kind of conversations to clear the air, and then sometimes recognizing, even when you've cleared the air, you might still feel hurt or upset. And sometimes for me personally, I would need a little bit longer than Nick, because he was wanting to quickly resolve things. I just needed some space to just feel, okay, we've sorted this out, but I just need a little bit more space. And then you come round and we choose to do something fun together. And actually, by making those choices, by entering into that moment, because you've cleared the air, you can then go forward and enjoy whatever it is that you've done. And I'm saying all this like it's a perfect formula. And it didn't always happen that way, because, we're human and we make mistakes and we don't have the best attitudes all the time. However, in my head, the intention was to do the right thing, and recognizing however I might have felt about what Nick may have said or done that has hurt me, and vice versa, we would know that our intentions for each other are actually good and positive, even if they've come out as a bit of a mess in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know, you have said so many powerful things in that one example there. Gosh, bring it the top things that we argue over as couples, those deeply held beliefs, parenting styles, money, in-laws, all those things that compact with all these different assumptions and beliefs around the right thing to do. It takes skill to be able to talk about those things honestly and compassionately, and sometimes we get it wrong. But getting better at having the conversation and then doing it well. And I love when you very vulnerably and honestly share that even when it's resolved, it takes a while for the emotions to catch up.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
There's so many powerful things that you've shared in there. How do you, and I loved what you said about date night, those micro moments, because these are the conversations that we're having before we get married, where we check in on each other and then life gets so busy.
Yeah, that's when it's all fun back in the day.
Yeah, but we're doing it before we get married. But there's this assumption that because you're passing time around each other, that you're investing in the relationship when you're really not. You've spoken with people across many different cultures, couples, marriages from different faiths, different backgrounds. What is there a common theme? Is there any differences? What have you noticed in the conversations you've had about what makes couple relationships and marriages work just across the various faiths, cultures? It's not just an us thing to talk about date night here in England, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. I think that's definitely been something that's come up time and time again. And however you want to frame that, whether you want to say date night or whether you just, whether it's carving time out or however you frame that, that absolutely has been a pattern that I've seen again and again, that couples who make time for each other, and it's not just an opportunity for me to be able to say, or for one person to say, this is who I am and what I've been doing. It is that two-way. Of course, it's about the listening as well. And I think that, again, every couple I've spoken to, and actually listened to couples as well, because prior to working for Marriage Foundation, I was with a charity called Explore, and we would take couples into schools, into secondary schools, and they would place themselves in front of young adults and teenagers and would be questioned about their relationship.
And remember, you got us to do that as well.
Yes.
So yes, we remember that one.
I won't share the first question we got asked by those kids.
Kids don't hold back, huh?
I mean, it was brilliant because it just meant that these young people could finally get the chance. Interestingly, after they got the initial kind of shyness of, can I really ask anything I want to ask? But once they started asking, you'd hear these stories of couples, and you'll have told those stories yourself. And there's a real vulnerability in telling those stories. But again, the thing that I kept on hearing and kept on seeing was that people saying we needed to make sure we spent time with each other. And I know that something gets talked a lot about in relationships are different types of love languages and how we relate to one another. And all of those things are really important. And I love them. I love the idea of thinking about how we communicate with one another. But that sort of time, quality time, it's not a kind of a pick and choose a love language. All of those love languages are valid, and quality time is essential in relationships. It might be more important to others, but it must happen in order for us to still understand and know each other. Because as you said, Andrea, it's easy to think, well, if people are working and going about their business, they've got their parenting, they're in the same space. Well, surely that's enough. But no, it just isn't, because you can so easily forget to take care of that relationship. You can take it for granted because it's just there. And I think as soon as you start feeling like that, there's a danger zone. And I say couples in schools, couples of different faiths, couples of different ages. It's not just younger couples who are early in marriage or early in their relationship. They need to do this. It's couples of any age, of any stage of a relationship. Invest is just like absolutely at its core.
What if though? I mean, the it's all great when couples are thinking the best and moving forward together, and all good. Yes, they have a few bumps on the road and we work it all out. But we were talking to a divorce lawyer the other day, and I dropped that one out there. Not for us, not for ourselves, but really because the conversation we're having is how can we help them support some of the clients that are going through separation and, have better conversations, even if they have decided they're going to go their separate ways, have better conversations. But in that space, quite often the challenge is one person thinks, look, I'm the good person here, they're a bad person. In fact, what the divorce lawyer was sharing with us is these things go in phases and cycles. A few years ago, there was a phase where basically every person that came into their room said their partner was a
narcissist.
Was a narcissist. It was narcissist phase. As far as they were concerned, they're a narcissist. I'm okay.
Yeah,
that's not reality.
You start looking for the evidence. We all have some narcissistic tendencies in each of us. So if you go looking for it, you'll find it. But suddenly everybody was, clinically narcissistic.
Yeah. But in those situations where the people they genuinely feel like they've done nothing wrong, it's all the other person's fault, it's beyond fixing, I can't change them, at least they recognize they can't change. They've tried, they probably have tried to change the other person. Any thoughts on what do you do then? Is it you just keep going, you keep banging your head against a brick wall, or what would you say to people like that?
I think it is really difficult when those kind of situations occur. And again, I'm looking back to some of my Relationship Hub interviews that I've done. And actually, I had two situations. I had one where I interviewed a female on her own, just because her husband basically was camera shy, didn't want to, do the interview. But there's another scenario where it was the couple. Both instances, an affair had taken place within the marriage. And first of all, as the person who's doing the interview, I can't tell you how humbling it is when someone is willing to tell their story, and seeing it as an opportunity to tell their story so that others can actually benefit from that. Just quite something, really. And what I saw in both of those couples was, yes, they absolutely got to a point of feeling like, how can we come back to where we were with this having happened? And interestingly, when I used to do Explore, some of the young people would say, of course, the most unforgivable thing is if someone cheats on you. There's no way back. This is not going to happen. It's impossible. And there'll be lots of nods of agreement and so on. And then you meet with couples who say, no, actually, I feel opposite to that. And interestingly for me, this hasn't happened to me. So I almost feel as though me saying, well, I would like to think that I would make the right choices. I don't feel that I'd do that to Nick or vice versa. But how can I really say that with any kind of real authenticity when I haven't experienced something like that? When you have experienced something like that, you have a voice and you have a real opportunity to make a difference to others and how they view relationships. So when I interviewed these couples, and indeed heard couples through Explore talking to young people about having come back from an affair, I learned a great deal as well. You learn so much about relationships. But what would often be the case would be this moment of feeling like this is impossible. There's no way back from this. To actually beginning to think back to what was it that I believed in when this relationship began? Who is it that I fell in love with? Who was that person? Am I willing to give all of this up because of what's happened? Or do I want to try and build up and restore? And I mean, we're just having a short kind of chat here compared to the lifetime that these people have lived and dealing with that. And it can take sometimes, sort of years for people to come back. There was this choice saying, I don't know how I'm going to get from where I am now to where we would like to be again, but I'm going to make a choice today to start to rebuild. And what I found interesting, it would be often a case of 2 steps forwards, 1 step back, because of course a big part of it is building trust again.
Exactly.
And feeling betrayed, that feeling of betrayal, being let down, thinking, can I trust them again? And things like one of the couples talk about feeling like they wanted to check phones and that sort of thing. And actually the person who had the affair said, check my phone. They made themselves vulnerable. And I think when things get very difficult in a relationship, the thing that I have noticed is vulnerability is essential. And knowing that if you're going to be vulnerable, that's a safe scenario to be vulnerable, knowing that if you're going to say, well, this is harmful and this is what's going on, I have let you down, I have done X, Y, and Z. I want us to build again, and working out what that safe space looks like. And as I say, it took a while. It took a long time for some of these couples to rebuild, but they kept making choices. And of course, it came back to caring for one another's interests and life. It's not just telling you what I've been doing, but if your other half is telling you about something that they are into, it could be a hobby or activity, their work, it's not just listening and going, oh great, good. It's really taking on that story and taking on what's going on for them and what's valuable to them. And I think it's about re-establishing what's valuable for the other person. And it is difficult, going back to your earlier point, John, of that sense of people feeling like, well, I've done nothing wrong. And you could argue that in some relationships, maybe it's 70% one person, but 30% the other. But there's still 30% to take responsibility for. There's still an accountability for your 30%. And I'm saying all this outside of the context of any kind of abuse. Can I just make that absolutely clear? Because
good
that
point.
is another thing altogether. And I'm not in a position to speak into that kind of situation. I'm talking about relationships, regular relationships that can feel at times as though there is no way back. But actually we start to look inwards about our own responsibilities, our own actions, our own behaviours, and as well as being able to listen and understand someone else's vulnerability and why they may have behaved in a certain way. And I mentioned earlier about, when Nick and I, my husband and I, would have disagreements over things, or, we might hurt one another, that having to remind myself that his intention, his thinking in his mind is not, I'm out to hurt Michaela here. I'm going to see how bad I'm going to make it feel. The intention is that he loves me, wants to do the right thing by me, but has behaved in a particular way because he also may feel hurt or whatever. And keeping on reminding myself of where he is at, what he's thinking, assuming the best, not assuming the worst, assuming that they want the best for me. And all of those things help me to have a broader perspective on the way someone behaves if it's not brilliant. And I saw that absolutely with some of these couples I would speak to on the relationship hub, where they would recognize that despite the struggles, the other person is trying now to do the best for that person. Well, that's your question. I realize.
No, absolutely. And it's really important, though, that the other person, at least in those situations where you're trying to rebuild the trust, everybody's got to do their bit. Because there's certainly some conversations we've had with couples who've been going through challenges, and particularly where they've had infidelity as part of the mix in the relationship, and then trying to work things through, but still having challenges around trust, around, say, and the situations that we've had, it's been the guy who his phone has been a private thing and not willing to share that and be open and vulnerable with that. So how do you rebuild trust in a situation like that? It's not easy. I think both parties have to be willing to be giving. I think you were being very conservative in saying sometimes it's 70%, 30%. We'll say, look, even if it's 95%, 5%, you still have to take responsibility for your 5%, even if they are bad person, quote unquote.
But I love the way, you said two words that are really key to highlight and go back to. One is about a choice and choosing again the person that you married and understanding what might have gone wrong in along the way. But even if you can't see the steps between where you are and where you'd like to get to, making a choice every day to do that journey. And the second word is vulnerability. And so often in a relationship, when we misunderstand each other, we have all these unspoken needs that don't get met, unmet expectations that frustrate us. And we react out of that place of hurt and frustration. So the intentions don't seem that good anymore. How do you... It's such a grown-up thing that we all need to learn to do, isn't it? To be vulnerable, even when we're feeling hurt, and saying, this is how that landed with me, rather than, you bad person, I'm going to make you feel as hurt as you made me feel, and you end up in this spiral. And there is so much wisdom that you share, even in sharing stories. what's the best advice that you got when you were starting out? Where did all this wisdom kind of come from for you?
We want to get to your source here.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of the wisdom has come from my mistakes as well. That's
So say all of us, yeah.
Case. And I think, interestingly, actually, it does hark back to probably what I've already referred to, and that is about having time for each other. And that date nights, investing in one another. I would say as well, I feel privileged because both my parents and my husband's parents, their marriages have remained and they are intact. And we've had that legacy, I guess. So
that example, that role model.
And I don't take that for granted. I don't think that is the answer for everybody. Therefore, you come from that. Therefore, it equals a relationship that will work and last.
Yeah.
But I think we did have role models in terms of how valuable a relationship is, how valuable a marriage is. And I think a mindset that Nick and I would have both said from the very outset was, this is for life.
Wow.
And as far as we know, our intention is that this will be for life. And I think that all of those things help. So I say that because I feel I need to be honest about that as a backdrop to my circumstances. However, I know that if we hadn't had that advice of, investing in one another, having regular date nights, making sure that even with the demands of children, and it's very easy when children are in the mix, that you then put your focus on your children and they become the driving force for life. And actually prioritizing my marriage, my relationship with Nick, means I'm offering the very best for my children.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
If I can be the best person in my relationship with Nick, I know that I can then be a better mum. I absolutely believe that those things are sequential. And you're not doing your kids a disservice by saying I'm prioritizing my relationship, because that is the very best thing for my kids, is what I believe. And I think that I've seen that demonstrated in other couples as well. So I'm speaking from my own personal experience, but I'm also speaking from the scenarios, the stories, the people I've met along the way who would say, yes, that's been the case for them. That's been the truth for them as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Each other, absolutely.
Not only are you not doing them a disservice, you're actually doing them a very great service by shoring up the relationship so that they can see that security modeled and draw strength from that, and also go on to create healthy relationships, and know that healthy relationships, sometimes there's disagreements, sometimes there's arguments. We just need to know how to manage it in a way that creates better understanding without damaging the relationship.
As I'm sure you'd have shared with all those young people, those kids through the Explore sessions. We were really sorry to hear that Explore had closed their doors in recent times. I guess so many charities have struggled
with funding after COVID.
Exactly, in the current environment. But what in parting, if you will, I'm conscious of time here, but when you were sharing with the young people, with those kids in the schools, and they're all excited about going into relationships and so on, what one word of advice would you have given them? Or if you hark back on that, I'm sure there was lots of advice you would have given them, but if you had to pick out one, what would that be? And yes, the sort of date nights and so on is great, and absolutely, but if you add one, is there one more you would add to that, to just say to people, this is what you want to be doing to really give yourselves the best chance of that relationship working out?
Yeah, I think something that I have picked up among younger people, I've picked up from my nieces and nephews, because my sister's marriage broke down a number of years ago. And I remember having a conversation with my nephew about commitment, as in, I don't mean I approached it with him, as in it came up.
Right.
And we talked around this, and he was saying, I don't know that I could ever really commit to someone, I could really trust someone. And I saw this same thinking echoed throughout the time with Explore, where I would come across young people who are scared of commitment. And if you think about the culture we live in, there's a different kind of approach to everything. Nobody kind of necessarily has things in a long-term sort of way. People have to rent a lot more now because they can't afford mortgages, or even with music, we don't buy CDs anymore. You have Stream Light, whatever,
Get the one you
Spotify,
want.
whatever. Yeah.
Forget buying the album.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bit of a kind of comeback, isn't there, to the vinyls, but that's a collective thing.
True.
But ultimately, this idea of having to commit to something for a long time seemed like, well, why would I want to do that? What if it all goes wrong? I need a get out. And of course, that mindset is an unhealthy way to start, I believe.
Yeah.
If you're starting by thinking this might not work, then, it sets up the kind of situation in a place of difficulty. So I think one of the things that I try to really encourage young people, I would do a bit of, an introduction before couples would come along, and we would talk about commitment and talk about what that meant in a marriage. And actually, when you choose to marry somebody, and this is the difference, I guess, between informal cohabitation compared with marriage, is that when you choose to marry somebody or a civil partnership, both people have got to a point of saying, yes, I want to be with you, and my intention is for this to work and last. With informal cohabitation, there can be an asymmetry of commitment, and you'll find that perhaps one of them will be, I want this to go the distance, and the other person's thinking, well, let's see what happens. I don't know how it's going to turn out. And so it can make things difficult, and it can make things tense at times as well, because the mindset and expectation around what this relationship ought to be and how it might move forward is different. And I think I would really encourage young people to see commitment as an advantage rather than something that is going to tie them down, inverted commas, or, end their freedom. And I would talk about the fact that actually, for me personally, being married has given me a new freedom to be more than I thought I could be without my other half, and vice versa. He would say the same. So I think for others listening, for younger people who perhaps feel challenged by the idea of, don't want to commit myself to anything, what if it goes wrong? That yes, there's a risk in commitment, because there's a risk in doing things, but actually the reward is great, because there's a mindset that says, I want this to work and last, and you're both on that same page, and it increases the chances of that relationship really working. It gives security. It gives that sense of loyalty to one another. I mean, commitment is such an important aspect of things working and lasting. And you can apply that to anything in life. If you sign up to do a marathon, I don't know, doing the London Marathon, and you sign up and you're with a charity and you're raising funds for them. Once you've signed up, once you've said, I'm committed.
You're only going to run 1 mile at a time. Just 1 mile. We'll take it a mile at a time and see how it goes.
800 meters are the last thing.
Doesn't quite work like that, does it?
Yeah. But you're willing to see it through. Whereas if you say, well, I'm going to do a marathon, let's see what happens. If you don't sign up for anything, you're less likely for that to happen. Yeah. So actually, for me, commitment has brought so much joy and beauty to my relationship. And commitment sounds like a dry, uninteresting word. It sounds functional, but actually it's brought liberation. It's brought so much to my relationship, because we both know where we stand. So I think that's one of the things I would say. I know that's probably a slight deviation from general advice around relationships, date nights, learning to trust, be vulnerable, be open, communicate. But actually being willing to take a risk with someone that you love and investing in that. And the other thing I'd say is that when we make a choice, coming back to this word choices again.
Which is commitment, really. Yeah. It's I choose you, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when we choose somebody to spend life with, I think we want to make our choice right, if you understand what I mean. We want to make our choice successful because we've chosen that. We've chosen that person above any other person. We want our choice to be the right one. And you could apply that again in all areas of life. When you choose something, you've been deliberating, it's then that once you've made the choice, often, well, that was the best thing I could have done. I'm glad we went to that restaurant because actually the food was so much nicer there. Isn't that a great choice?
Yeah.
That's a small thing. But do you understand what I mean? Our intention changes once we've made a choice about something.
And our behaviors follow through on that. We want to prove that it was the right choice.
Exactly. I love what you said there, Michaela, with going back to the point you made about getting to the point of committing to each other, whether it's a marriage or a formal civil partnership. Because then you've checked in with each other. Is this something you want to do?
Yeah. Are we on the same page?
Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
And we had a wonderful conversation just the other day, actually, with somebody you know very well, Sir Paul, who you know and work with very well, on a different but related topic. There we were having a conversation with him about prenuptial agreements, prenups. And just saying actually how he himself was saying back in the day when they first became a thing, he was very anti them. But he's actually gotten to the point where he thinks actually they're a very good thing, because just going through that process encourages people to have conversations that they wouldn't otherwise have, thinking about the future and thinking, actually, is this something that we really want to do?
Yeah.
And once you have those conversations, you then decide, yes, we're on the same page, let's do this, or actually we're on different pages, let's get out of here, and save yourself a whole lot of angst down the road. So having those conversations can be such a good thing, to just decide, actually, we're on this thing, let's make this thing work. Let's go.
Making the choice up front to commit. I love that. And I think you're right. That's a word that we really need to be encouraging the next generation to think about, and not fear for the future, but know that this will help them be the best version of themselves, because they have this person solidly on their side cheering them on. I think chances are we need to have you back, because there's so much more, so much more that we could have unpacked and talk about. But thank you so much, Michaela, for sharing your words of wisdom with us, and for being so open with your stories. And maybe we'll do this again.
Thank you so much. I would love to come back again. I could chat to you all day. So that suits me.
Bless you. Thank you so much. Maybe see you again. But for now, it's a wrap.
And last thing, Relationship Hub and the M Word, we will put those links in the show notes in case anybody wants to get in touch with you. Is
there anything else that you'd like to, if people wanted to find out more about you, or those are two?
I mean, obviously, do check out Marriage Foundation, the work we do. It's one of the things which we could maybe come back to on another occasion is looking at something called the marriage gap, the social injustices around family breakdown. There's a whole lot of stuff, research on the website, so do have a look at that. And Relationship Hub, I'm not doing interviews at the moment, but there's a whole stack of interviews on there, including some of the ones I've referred to today, so that's worth checking out.
Interesting for people,
those are the main two things I would say to have a look.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks, Michaela. See you again next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, and you want to hear more, the best thing to do is subscribe. Then you'll never miss an episode. There's a new one every Friday. You can stay connected with us on social media at The 4 Habits for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to participate in discussions related to the show. We always love to hear from you. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred platform to allow us to reach more listeners and help people around the globe radically transform the way they do relationships, so they too can enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life.